Today, our story takes us to the Allagash River. The Allagash is 65 miles long and is known for its natural beauty and fishing opportunities. On Friday night, August 20, 1974, 4 young art students in their early 20s left Boston, Massachusetts for a canoe and camping trip along the Allagash River. The group consisted of identical twins, Jack and Jim Weiner, Charlie Foltz and Chuck Rack. Upon arrival at a staging point, they hired a pontoon aeroplane, which flew them and their canoes to Telos Lake on the Allagash waterway. During the next several days, the 4 students were enjoying their time. They camped, had barbecues, and reminisced over the campfire. On the evening of Thursday, August 26th, they reached Eagle Lake, set up camp, and decided to go night fishing for trout. Because they were in the middle of nowhere, there was very little light, and decided to build a large campfire which could light up the area and serve as a marker to keep their bearings just in case they got lost. However, shortly after beginning to fish, Chuck became silent and had a feeling of being watched. Chuck then suddenly turned around towards the direction from where he felt this and saw a large, bright sphere of coloured lights hovering motionless and soundless about 200 to 300 feet away. Chuck's hairs stood on end and immediately shouted for the others to look at what he was seeing. There, rising above the trees, was a huge oval glowing object. As their eyes became adapted to its intense brightness, they could see that it was a metallic disc that seemed to be rotating. Charlie grabbed his flashlight and flashed it at the object. Then, immediately, the huge rising glowing object came to an abrupt halt and began to slowly approach their canoe. Simultaneously, a tube-shaped beam of light erupted from the object and hit the water. A glowing ring with a dark centre reflected on the water's surface, indicating that the beam was hollow. The object and its beam of light began moving towards the canoe. Terrified, the campers began swimming towards their bonfire and camp as soon as they could. The next thing Charlie remembered was the group paddling for shore and standing at the campsite with the others. Chuck Rack remembers staying in the canoe after the others had piled out in a panic. Transfixed, still holding his paddle, he could not take his eyes off the object. Jack and Jim were able to consciously remember a bit more. They recall frantically swimming towards their campfire while the blue beam flashed over them, then seemingly reappearing near their camp. The object began to move up and away from them towards the southwestern sky, and then shot off into the stars and was gone in just a second. Jim Weiner stated that there was no mistake that it was coming directly to us. Then I remember standing on the lake shore, watching the object hover above the lake 50 to 75 yards in front of us. Then the search beam went upwards into the sky, and we saw it moving away at a tremendous speed. We all seemed to be in a state of shock. We just stood there, unable to move or talk. When the strange anesthesizing effect wore off, Chuck got out of the canoe and joined the others as they trudged up the beach towards their camp. What is strange is that before they left for fishing, they left several large logs on the fire, which would have lasted at least 3 to 4 hours. However, when they looked at their campfire, it was completely burnt out, and only small embers remained. Which is strange, because from what they could recall, they only fished for 10 minutes maximum. This caused them to be even more confused, and had no idea where the loss of time went. At this point, the lads finished their trip, and in future years would occasionally talk about what happened. A few years later, Jim suffered a head injury, and while he was unconscious, recalled segments of what happened on that night, and can recall being laid down in a strange room with other short people being around him. Curious, Jim later contacted a hypnotherapist in an attempt to make the picture in his mind clear about what happened that evening. He also persuaded the other 3 of his friends who were there that night to do the same. Under hypnosis, they all recalled a very similar story. All were transferred from their canoe into the UFO by the hollow tube-like beam of light. On board, they encountered strange humanoid creatures with huge black eyes and pale grey skin. They described the strange room that they were in. It was all smooth, with no obvious signs of human engineering, and was completely different from a typical man-made craft. All 4 students were made to lie on a table, where each were examined by a number of strange handheld instruments that were lowered over their bodies. They recalled the alien entities removing samples of saliva, skin scrapings, and blood from each of the abductees. They then recall strange sensations surging through their bodies as they found themselves floating down the hollow beam of light into their canoe, which was now in the shallow water near their campsite. The tube-like light seemed to hold the canoe steady as each was placed in the same seating positions they were prior to the abduction. As the hypnosis sessions continued, much more details were recovered about their experience. This case is rather unique, as all 4 of the students recalled strikingly similar accounts, and all of them struggled mentally after these sessions to comprehend what they had experienced. They would go on to state that they were visited again and again after this experience, apparently to do further experiments. There are various opinions about this case, from a hoax to a real-life alien abduction. It is difficult to say. Anyway, that's it for today's story, and let me know what you think in the comments. Would you camp out at Allagash River where the so-called abductions took place? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.